At my late husband's will reading, my son and his wife tried to take everything, claiming I was too old to manage it. They offered me a tiny apartment, saying they were doing me a favor. I just looked at them, realizing they understood nothing about me or Arthur. When they see what I do next, they'll regret that day. Like this story, share it, and tell me where you're listening from. The heavy oak door of Mr. Albright's office closed with a soft thud, sealing them inside with the lingering scent of old paper and hushed grief. Eleanor, a woman whose 65 years carried the grace of a life well lived and the recent burden of profound loss, sat opposite the stoic attorney. Beside her, her son, Michael, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed on the mahogany table. Serafina, Michael's wife, sat primly, a faint, almost imperceptible air of anticipation about her. For Eleanor, the world had lost its vibrant hues the day Arthur, her beloved husband of 40 years, drew his last breath. This will reading was another painful step in a journey she wished she never had to take. Mr. Albright, a man whose gentle voice belied the gravity of his profession, cleared his throat. He spoke of Arthur's foresight, his meticulous planning, and above all, his unwavering love for Eleanor. He unfolded the last will and testament, its pages crisp and final. "Arthur Penhaligon," he began, his voice resonating with a practiced solemnity, "leaves his entire estate, encompassing all assets, properties, investments, and personal effects, valued at approximately $42 million, to his beloved wife, Eleanor Penhaligon." The words hung in the air, a shimmering cascade of disbelief and profound emotion. $42 million. Eleanor's breath hitched. It was an astronomical sum, far more than she had ever truly grasped Arthur's net worth to be. She knew he was successful, a shrewd businessman, but Arthur had always lived modestly, investing wisely, never flaunting his wealth. He had built an empire from scratch, a testament to his intelligence and relentless hard work. This inheritance was not merely money, it was Arthur's final, enduring embrace, a blanket of security and love cast over her future. A wave of bittersweet gratitude washed over her, mingling with the fresh pang of grief. Her eyes welled up, not for the money, but for the depth of Arthur's provision, his eternal thoughtfulness. He was still taking care of her, even now. Just as the emotion threatened to overwhelm her, a sharp, intrusive sound cut through the quiet reverence. Michael cleared his throat, a deliberate, almost aggressive sound that grated against the hushed atmosphere. Eleanor looked at her son, startled. The face looking back at her was subtly changed, hardened. There was a coldness in his eyes she had never seen before, a calculating glint that sent a shiver down her spine. Beside him, Serafina wore a subtle, almost smile, a sly curve of her lips that barely registered but spoke volumes. "Mom," Michael began, his voice surprisingly devoid of warmth, almost dismissive. "You don't need all that money." Eleanor blinked, trying to process his words. He continued, his tone gaining an edge. "You're 65 years old. What are you going to do with $42 million? Eleanor felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Arthur wanted me to have it." "Michael," she started, her voice a little shaky. "You're already old," Michael interrupted, his gaze unwavering and unnervingly direct. "You should go learn to earn your own money, instead of living off Dad's hard work." The words were a slap across her face, stinging not just with their cruelty, but with the utter disregard for her own contributions throughout their marriage. Had he forgotten the countless hours she'd spent supporting Arthur's ventures, managing their home, raising him, the quiet strength she had always provided? Serafina chimed in, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. "Exactly. Eleanor, what's a woman your age going to do with that kind of money? You'll probably just waste it on medical bills or bingo games." She chuckled, a short, brittle sound, as if she had just delivered a witty punchline. Eleanor stared at them, a slow, sickening realization dawning on her. This wasn't her son. This wasn't the kind boy she had raised, the man Arthur had loved and mentored. A chilling, predatory gleam had replaced his familiar affection. So, Michael continued, leaning forward, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur to Mr. Albright, though clearly intended for Eleanor. We've decided it's best if we transfer the entire inheritance to Serafina. She's much better with finances, and frankly, Mom isn't good with money. It's for her own good. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. Betrayal, sharp and suffocating, wrapped around her heart. This is what your father wanted, she managed to whisper, her voice a fragile protest against the onslaught. Her mind reeled, trying to grasp the enormity of what they were proposing, the brazenness of their demand. Michael's response was immediate, brutal. Dad's gone, Mom. He doesn't want anything anymore. The dismissal was absolute, a cold erasure of Arthur's memory, his intentions, his very existence. It was as if Arthur's love for her, expressed so generously in his will, meant nothing to his own son. Then came the offer. Michael pushed a neatly folded document across the table. We've arranged for you to have a comfortable little apartment, Mom. And we'll cover all your basic expenses, of course. Healthcare, groceries, utilities. You won't have to worry about a thing. He gestured vaguely, as if presenting a generous gift, while simultaneously stealing her entire future. Serafina, ever the supportive accomplice, nodded earnestly. Yes, Eleanor. We're actually doing you a favor, freeing you from all that financial stress. Think of it as retirement from worrying about money. Her smile was patronizing, utterly devoid of genuine concern, a mask for blatant greed. Eleanor looked from her son's impassive face to Serafina's simpering smile, and then to the papers Michael was now pushing closer, a pen lying innocently beside them. This wasn't her son. This was a stranger, cold, calculating, driven by an avarice that was horrifying to behold. He was not just stealing her inheritance. He was trying to erase Arthur's last act of love, to diminish her worth, to control her life. In that moment, a profound, undeniable truth settled over Eleanor. Michael and Serafina understood nothing. They understood nothing of her quiet strength, nothing of her intelligence, nothing of the deep, intricate partnership she had shared with Arthur for 40 years. They saw only an old woman, vulnerable and easily manipulated, a vessel from which wealth could be siphoned. They had gravely underestimated her, and they had no idea who Arthur Penhaligon truly was, or the secrets he had entrusted to her. 3 weeks had passed since the will reading, 3 weeks that felt like an eternity. The Grand Penhaligon residence, a home that had hummed with the warmth of 40 years of marriage, now felt cavernous and cold, echoing with an unbearable emptiness. It was as if the soul of the house had departed with Arthur, leaving behind only the ghost of happier times. Boxes, both empty and overflowing, stood like silent sentinels in every room, marking the relentless dismantling of Eleanor's life. Eleanor moved through the familiar spaces like a somnambulist, carefully wrapping small, precious mementos in tissue paper, her heart a raw, exposed nerve. She was packing her belongings, the few items she was permitted to take to her new, uncertain future. In the dining room, Serafina stood imperiously, directing a team of movers with the precision of a general. Her voice, sharp and authoritative, sliced through the quiet melancholy. "Careful with those, gentlemen," Serafina commanded, gesturing towards a delicate stack of porcelain plates. "Those are for our formal dining room. They're quite valuable." Eleanor's head snapped up. It was her grandmother's china, a cherished heirloom passed down through generations, each plate a delicate whisper of family history. Arthur had insisted they use it only on special occasions, revering its sentimental value as much as she did. "Serafina," Eleanor interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "Those are my grandmother's. They have immense sentimental value to me. They belong with my personal items." Serafina turned, a cool, dismissive look on her face. "Sentimental value doesn't pay bills, does it, Eleanor? These are assets now, part of the estate, and the estate belongs to us." She punctuated the statement with a thin, unfeeling smile. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of despair wash over her. They weren't just taking her financial security, they were systematically erasing her past, stripping away the very fabric of her identity. Each item, Serafina claimed, felt like a physical wrenching of her heart. In the study, a room that had once been Arthur's sanctuary, Michael appeared, carrying a box of Arthur's leather-bound books. He moved stiffly, his shoulders hunched, his eyes fixed on the floor. He hadn't looked at Eleanor directly since that dreadful day in Mr. Albright's office. He treated her like an inconvenient stranger, a temporary obstacle to be navigated around. The casual ease and affection that once defined their relationship had vanished, replaced by an unsettling, almost aggressive avoidance. "Michael," Eleanor said softly, hoping to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. He flinched, as if her voice were an unpleasant surprise. He simply nodded curtly, averted his gaze, and continued out of the room, leaving her alone with the ghosts of shared laughter and quiet conversations. Later, as Eleanor carefully placed a small, framed photo of Arthur and herself on their wedding day into a box, Seraphina's voice cut through the silence again. "Oh, and by the way, Eleanor, an appraiser will be coming by tomorrow morning for your jewelry." Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over the box. "My jewelry?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What about my jewelry?" "Well, dear," Seraphina said, her tone falsely sweet. "Everything bought during the marriage is community property, isn't it? That includes all your rings, necklaces, everything. We'll need to have it valued for the estate." Horror blossomed in Eleanor's chest. "My wedding ring?" she choked out, holding up her left hand, where the simple gold band and sparkling diamond had rested for 4 decades. "My anniversary gifts? These are personal belongings, Seraphina. Arthur gave them to me." Michael reappeared, drawn by the rising tension. He glanced at Eleanor, then quickly away. "Mom, you're being dramatic," he said, his voice flat, devoid of empathy. "They're just things." "Just things?" Her wedding ring was not just a thing. It was a symbol of her eternal vow, the very essence of her union with Arthur. Bought with his love, not his money. The pearl necklace for their 25th anniversary, the sapphire brooch for their 30th. Each piece held a memory, a moment of joy, a testament to a love that had defied time. "Where am I supposed to live?" Eleanor asked, the question escaping her lips before she could stop it. It was a cry of desperation, of utter helplessness. Seraphina reached into her handbag and pulled out a slip of paper, extending it towards Eleanor. "Here's the address. It's a cozy 1-bedroom apartment, quite manageable for someone like you." Eleanor took the paper, her fingers trembling. A 1-bedroom apartment. After a lifetime in this spacious, beautiful home Arthur had built. "We'll cover the rent for 6 months, Michael added, his voice still distant. "That should give you enough time to, get on your feet. Find a job." The implication was clear. After 6 months, she was on her own. Eleanor stared at him, aghast. "A job? Michael, I haven't worked in 30 years. What am I supposed to do?" The world outside the domestic sphere felt alien and intimidating. Her skills were in nurturing, managing a household, supporting her husband, all things they now dismissed as valueless. Seraphina let out a small, derisive snort. "Walmart is always looking for greeters, I hear. Or perhaps a cashier? Something simple." Her smile was smug, knowing. "That's not really our problem, is it?" she added, echoing Michael's sentiment from weeks ago, the echo of a chilling indifference. Eleanor stood amidst the wreckage of her life, watching as her past, her memories, her very identity, were systematically packed away, claimed, or dismissed. Her son, the boy she had nurtured, loved, and sacrificed for, had become a stranger, a callous extension of his grasping wife. The grief for Arthur was now compounded by a profound sorrow for the loss of her son, but beneath the crushing weight of betrayal and despair, a tiny flicker ignited within Eleanor, a spark of something hard and unyielding. They thought she was frail, easily broken, a mere obstacle. They had stripped her bare, but in doing so, they had also stripped away the last vestiges of her gentle compliance. She looked at the address in her hand, the empty boxes, the disappearing remnants of her life with Arthur. She would survive this. and she would remember every insult, every dismissal, every cruel word. A quiet, burning determination began to forge itself in the depths of her soul. 4 months into her new life, Eleanor found her small, beige apartment utterly soulless. The walls, painted in an insipid neutral tone, offered no comfort, no personality. It was a box, a temporary dwelling, devoid of the history and warmth that had defined her former home. Each morning, she woke to a quiet so profound it felt oppressive, a stark contrast to the lively rhythm of the Penhaligon estate. She missed the soft morning light filtering through the antique lace curtains, the familiar scent of Arthur's coffee brewing, the gentle hum of a house filled with memories. Most of all, she missed her old life, a life rich with friendships and community. Now, she felt like a ghost, a nobody, adrift in a sea of anonymity. Attempts to reconnect with old friends proved awkward, stilted. How could she explain? How could she articulate the betrayal, the callousness of her own son, without sounding like a bitter, delusional old woman? She couldn't bring herself to confess the truth, the humiliating reality of her situation. So, the calls became fewer, the silences longer. One afternoon, a call from Clara Jenkins, a friend of 20 years, amplified her isolation. "Eleanor, darling. It's been ages. I thought I saw you at the country club last week, but then I realized it must have been someone else." Clara's voice was bright, oblivious. Eleanor managed a weak laugh. "Oh, no, Clara, not me. I haven't been there in a while." The truth was, the country club, once a cornerstone of her social life, was now an unaffordable luxury. She simply couldn't bring herself to tell Clara that she had been stripped of her entire inheritance, that she could barely afford groceries. The lie felt like a hot flush of shame on her cheeks. A few days later, the universe seemed to delight in twisting the knife further. At the local supermarket, a fluorescent-lit cavern of endless aisles, Eleanor meticulously clipped coupons, stretching her meager allowance as far as it would go. As she reached for a discounted brand of tea, a familiar voice called out, "Eleanor? Is that really you?" It was Sophie Collins, a woman whose mother, Brenda, was part of Eleanor's closest circle of friends. Sophie's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and pity. "Oh, Eleanor, it's so good to see you. I was just talking to my mother about you. We were so sorry to hear about Arthur. He was such a wonderful man." Eleanor offered a faint smile, her heart sinking. She braced herself for the inevitable questions, the polite condolences, and, Sophie continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "Mom said Serafina called her the other day. Apparently, you're going through some difficulties? Serafina mentioned you might need some help. She said she was trying to get a few of us together to support you." Sophie's brow furrowed, a hint of confusion in her tone. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Going through some difficulties? Needing help? The humiliation was immediate, scalding. Serafina wasn't just taking Arthur's money. She was actively, maliciously, sabotaging Eleanor's reputation. She was painting her as a charity case, a hapless old woman who couldn't cope, to their entire social circle. The woman who had once hosted elegant dinner parties, who had co-chaired countless charity galas, was now being paraded as an object of pity. "I mean," Sophie continued, oblivious to the storm brewing within Eleanor. "Mom was a bit confused, because, well, I saw Michael and his wife at the Ferrari dealership last month. They were looking at a brand new, bright red one. It seemed a bit extravagant, given what Serafina was saying about your situation." The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. While Eleanor was meticulously clipping coupons, struggling to make ends meet, her son and his wife were parading around in luxury, flaunting the very wealth they had stolen from her. The betrayal was no longer just financial. It was deeply personal, a calculated assault on her dignity and standing. That evening, for the first time since she had moved into the beige box, Eleanor called Michael. Her voice was steady, betraying none of the tremor in her hands. "Michael, I just ran into Sophie Collins. She told me Serafina has been calling our friends, telling them I'm in dire straits, painting me as a charity case. There was a pause, a slight hesitation on Michael's end. Then, his voice, cold and distant, sliced through the line. Mom. Those weren't your friends. They were Dad's business contacts, people he cultivated for networking. You were just ancillary, Eleanor gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound. Ancillary. Michael, these women have been my friends for decades. Clara even called me. She asked why I wasn't at the country club. Oh, Clara, Michael scoffed. She mentioned your calls were awkward. You were complaining a lot. Frankly, Mom, you were making her uncomfortable. The accusations twisted in Eleanor's gut. Awkward? Complaining? She had been discreet, silent even in her pain. This was another lie, another deliberate act of character assassination. And as for Serafina's calls, Michael continued, his tone hardening, she was merely stating the facts. Because you do need help, Mom. You have no job skills, no career. You haven't worked a day in your life outside of managing Dad's household. He paused, as if expecting her to agree, to admit her supposed uselessness. Eleanor's voice, though quiet, was infused with a fierce, controlled rage. My life was being your father's wife, and your mother, Michael. That was my career. That was my job. His response was brutal, dismissive, severing the last fragile thread of their relationship. Your job is over, Mom. The line went dead. Eleanor stood clutching the phone, tears finally blurring her vision. Her job was over. His words echoed in the sterile silence of her apartment, but as the initial wave of hurt subsided, a cold, hard resolve took its place. Her job as a compliant, traditional wife and mother might be over, but a new, unforeseen role was just beginning, a job they would never expect. The dial tone echoed in Eleanor's ear, a flat, final sound that symbolized the severing of a bond she had once believed unbreakable. Michael's words, "Your job is over, Mom," hung in the stagnant air of her small apartment, reverberating with a devastating finality. 38 years. 38 years of sleepless nights, scraped knees, proud smiles, and unwavering support. 38 years of motherhood, condensed into a temporary, disposable role, summarily terminated by the very recipient of that boundless love. Michael, I'm still your mother, she had tried to interject before he cut her off, her voice cracking with the effort to hold on to something, anything. That doesn't end just because you're married. His reply had been swift, laced with a chilling detachment. You are still my mother, Mom, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to anything from me, or from my family. I just want my son back, she had whispered, the raw pain tearing at her throat. She hadn't wanted his money. Not really. She had wanted him to be the boy who brought her wildflowers, the teenager who confided his dreams, the man who respected her. But Michael's voice had been a stranger's, cold and unyielding. This is who I am now, Mom. This is who I've always been. You just never paid attention. And then, the click, the end of the line, leaving her suspended in a void of disbelief and profound grief. Eleanor slowly lowered the phone, her hand trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. She wasn't just grieving Arthur anymore. She was grieving the son she had raised, the future she had envisioned for their family. It was a double bereavement, a wound reopened and festering. She staggered to her narrow bed, the unfamiliar mattress offering little comfort. She lay there, staring at the bland ceiling, the weight of her new reality pressing down on her. How was she going to survive? Emotionally, she felt shattered. Financially, the clock was ticking. Only 2 months of rent assistance remained. A rapidly dwindling lifeline. A searing question burned in her mind. Had Arthur known? Had he foreseen Michael's betrayal, his callous disregard? And if so, why hadn't he protected her more explicitly? Why had he left her vulnerable to their greed? A small, persistent voice, barely a whisper in the echoing chambers of her mind, responded. Maybe he did. The thought was fleeting, almost immediately dismissed by the overwhelming sense of abandonment. How could he have protected her by leaving her everything, only for it to be stripped away so easily. The daunting reality of rebuilding her life from scratch at 65 felt insurmountable. Stripped of her home, her financial security, her social standing, and now, her son's affection, Eleanor felt like a ship cast adrift in a stormy sea. The loneliness was a constant companion, a pervasive ache that filled every corner of her small apartment, a stark contrast to the bustling, vibrant life she had once known. She missed the simple presence of Arthur, the comfort of his hand in hers, the shared laughter, the quiet understanding. The betrayal by Michael cut deeper than Arthur's death. In some ways, Arthur's passing was the natural, agonizing conclusion of a life well lived. Michael's actions, however, were an active tearing apart of love, a brutal renunciation of their shared history. It felt like a lie of love, a fabrication of everything she thought their relationship had been. It wasn't just a loss, it was an invalidation of her entire life's work. Yet, even in the depths of her despair, a hardening determination began to solidify within Eleanor. They thought she was weak, an easy target to be discarded. They saw her as obsolete, a relic of a bygone era, but they were wrong. She would not be discarded. The quiet strength that had underpinned her grace throughout her marriage, the resilience she had always possessed, began to reassert itself. She reflected on the woman she used to be. Not just Arthur's wife and Michael's mother, but a woman who ran their household with quiet efficiency, who volunteered tirelessly, who navigated complex social dynamics with effortless charm. She had been strong, capable, admired even by her son. Once, what had changed? Only their perception, blinded by greed. The pain was immense, a constant throb, but beneath it, a subtle sense of defiance grew. A quiet refusal to be defeated. She had faced challenges before, perhaps not on this scale, but she had always found a way. She had supported Arthur through lean years, navigated social snubs with grace, and raised a child who, for a time, she believed was a good man. This would be her greatest challenge yet, but Eleanor Penhaligon was not one to simply fade away. Not yet. Not ever. If you're enjoying Eleanor's journey and want to see how this incredible story unfolds, make sure to keep watching. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a single moment of her fight for justice. Now, back to our story. The knock came precisely 6 months to the day after Eleanor had signed away her life, after Michael had coldly severed their bond. It was a firm, polite rap that startled her, pulling her from the dreary tableau of her kitchen table. She was surrounded by a scattered collection of depressing job applications: data entry clerk, retail associate, library assistant, each one a stark reminder of her new, humbling reality. Her rent assistance, Michael's paltry 6-month offering, had just expired, and she dreaded the inevitable conversation with Mr. Lee, her landlord, about her inability to pay. She assumed it was him, coming to collect or evict. With a sigh that felt years deep, Eleanor pushed herself up from the worn kitchen chair and shuffled towards the door, mentally rehearsing her apologies and explanations. But when she peered through the peephole, it wasn't Mr. Lee's familiar, slightly gruff face. Instead, a distinguished older gentleman with silver hair and kind, intelligent eyes stood on her doorstep. He wore a finely tailored suit and held a leather briefcase. Eleanor opened the door, a flicker of confusion replacing her dread. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with wariness. "Mrs. Penhaligon?" the man inquired, his voice calm and reassuring. "My name is Thomas Thompson. I was Arthur Penhaligon's personal attorney." Eleanor's confusion deepened. "Arthur's personal attorney?" she repeated, a frown creasing her brow. "But Mr. Albright handled Arthur's will." "I don't recall?" Mr. Thompson offered a gentle smile. "Indeed. Mr. Albright handled the primary estate, Mrs. Penhaligon, but Arthur, being the remarkably far-sighted man he was, chose to keep certain matters entirely separate, under my counsel. My apologies for the delay in reaching you. Arthur had very specific instructions regarding the timing of my visit." He stepped inside at her silent invitation, surveying her small, beige apartment with a subtle, unreadable expression. He settled into the cramped living room, placing his briefcase on the floor beside him. Eleanor sat opposite him, a sense of unease fluttering in her stomach. What could this be about? Mrs. Penhaligon, Mr. Thompson began, his gaze steady. Arthur came to me approximately 2 years ago. He was troubled. He had observed some significant changes in Michael, particularly after his marriage to Serafina. Eleanor listened, her heart aching with a familiar pain. 2 years ago, that was around the time Michael had started to subtly shift, to become more distant, more materialistic. Arthur noticed Michael becoming increasingly dismissive of you. Mrs. Penhaligon, Mr. Thompson continued, his voice soft but firm, and overly focused on material wealth, to the exclusion of other, more important values. Arthur confided in me that he worried about your well-being should anything happen to him, especially given Michael's apparent change of character. Eleanor's eyes widened. Arthur had seen it. He had known. A fragile tendril of hope, long dormant, began to unfurl within her. Mr. Thompson reached down and unlatched his briefcase. He pulled out a document, its pages crisper, its binding more intricate than the will Mr. Albright had presented. Arthur, in his wisdom, foresaw a potential scenario where you might be let down. So, he instructed me to prepare a conditional will, a document entirely separate from the one administered by Mr. Albright. Eleanor stared at the document, bewildered. A conditional will? This was beyond anything she could have imagined. Arthur, always so shrewd, so perceptive, Mrs. Penhaligon, Mr. Thompson explained, his voice gentle. Arthur wanted to protect you. He understood that wealth, in the wrong hands, could corrupt. He loved Michael dearly, but he also recognized the potential for his son to be swayed by external influences and his own growing avarice. Arthur created a test, if you will, for Michael, Mr. Thompson revealed. A slight, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Michael, of course, was entirely unaware of its existence. Eleanor leaned forward, her heart pounding. The inheritance Michael received from Mr. Albright, Mr. Thompson continued, was not absolute. It was conditional. Conditional on his treatment of you. Eleanor, he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Arthur's instructions were explicit. If Michael treated you with kindness, respect, continued to support you and ensure your comfort as his mother, then the inheritance he received would become permanently his, legally and unequivocally. Eleanor held her breath, tears pricking her eyes. Arthur. Her brilliant, loving Arthur. However, Mr. Thompson's voice hardened slightly. If Michael abandoned you, if he humiliated you, if he left you in financial distress, if he failed to uphold his duties as a son, then the entire inheritance he received, the $42 million, would revert to you, Eleanor. Immediately and irrevocably, Eleanor gasped, a strangled sound of shock and dawning vindication. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. $42 million. But that's not all, Mrs. Penhaligon, Mr. Thompson added, picking up another document, slightly thicker than the last. Arthur, ever the strategist, had also quietly built a second fortune, entirely separate from his primary business interests, over the last decade. A significant portfolio of additional assets that he meticulously managed. These, too, were to be held in trust, awaiting the outcome of Michael's test. And should Michael fail, as he unfortunately has, these additional assets would also be transferred to you. Eleanor could only stare, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what she was hearing. Additional assets? She managed to croak. Mr. Thompson nodded. Yes, Mrs. Penhaligon. Based on current valuations, this second fortune amounts to approximately $60 million. $60 million. Added to the $42 million. $102 million. Eleanor felt lightheaded, a mixture of disbelief, relief, and a profound, aching love for the extraordinary man Arthur had been. He hadn't just protected her. He had empowered her, armed her with a weapon she never knew existed. And he had done it all with such quiet foresight, such unwavering love. Eleanor's lungs felt inadequate, struggling to draw enough oxygen to process the staggering revelation. $60 million. Arthur's second, hidden fortune. Added to the initial $42 million, it created a total beyond her wildest imagination, a vast reservoir of wealth that Arthur had silently, lovingly prepared for her. It was a testament to his unparalleled foresight, his profound love, and his unwavering trust in her. Mr. Thompson watched her, a sympathetic understanding in his eyes. The 6-month period Arthur stipulated ended yesterday. Mrs. Penhaligon, he confirmed, his voice gentle. I have been discreetly monitoring Michael's actions, as per Arthur's instructions. He proceeded to detail, with a professional detachment that belied the cruelty of the events. Eleanor's living conditions, the small apartment, the lack of financial support, the public humiliation orchestrated by Serafina, and Michael's increasingly cold and dismissive treatment. Each point was a painful echo of her suffering, now laid bare and validated. Arthur's fears about Michael's character, Mr. Thompson concluded, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly, were, unfortunately, completely justified. Michael failed the test, Mrs. Penhaligon. He failed utterly. Tears, hot and unstoppable, streamed down Eleanor's face. But these were not tears of sorrow or despair. They were tears of profound vindication, of relief so immense it stole her breath. Arthur had known. He had loved her enough to anticipate this exact scenario, to construct an elaborate safety net, a shield against the very people who sought to harm her. He had protected her, even from beyond the grave. Michael and Serafina, of course, Mr. Thompson continued, are entirely unaware that their access to the primary inheritance was temporary. They believed they had permanent, unconditional control over Arthur's original estate, and they have been spending quite freely. He paused, a grim line forming on his lips. My records indicate that in these past 6 months alone, they have spent nearly $8 million. On luxury cars, Mrs. Penhaligon, expensive jewelry for Serafina, and rather extensive, unnecessary renovations to the Penhaligon residence. Among other things, Eleanor listened, a cold fury beginning to simmer beneath her relief. $8 million. While she fretted over grocery coupons and job applications, they had squandered Arthur's legacy, her legacy, on frivolous excesses. That $8 million, Mr. Thompson stated, his voice now firm. They will now have to return. With interest. Because it was never legally theirs to spend in the first place. The magnitude of the justice unfolding was overwhelming. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, the crushing defeat of their greed, the utter reversal of fortune. She, the discarded, the humiliated, was now positioned to reclaim everything, and more. What happens now? Eleanor asked, her voice a fragile whisper. Mr. Thompson pushed a fresh set of documents across the table. They were crisp, official, bearing Arthur's distinctive signature and several intricate legal seals. Now, Mrs. Penhaligon, we activate the conditional will. Upon your signature, all of Arthur's assets, including the house you were evicted from, the entire business, all investments, and the additional $60 million portfolio, will be legally and irrevocably transferred to you, he continued. Furthermore, all expenditures made by Michael and Serafina during this 6-month period, which were unauthorized as per the terms of the conditional will, become debts owed to the estate. The estate, now solely under your control, will be legally entitled to reclaim every cent, plus interest. Any assets they purchased with those funds will be subject to seizure to cover their outstanding debt. Eleanor felt a thrill run through her. The house, her beloved home, would be hers again. Arthur's business, which she had helped him build from the ground up, would be hers. Her identity, stripped away so callously, would be restored. Will they go to jail? Eleanor asked, a flicker of apprehension mixed with the desire for retribution. Mr. Thompson considered this for a moment. That is difficult to say, Mrs. Penhaligon. Their actions, while morally reprehensible, may fall short of criminal charges, depending on the specifics of the trust and intent. However, I can assure you, the financial consequences will be significant. They will be left with virtually nothing and burdened with substantial debt, he added, with a subtle hint of satisfaction. Rebuilding their lives will be a considerable challenge. He offered her a pen. Eleanor took it, her hand steady now. As she prepared to sign, Mr. Thompson pointed to a small, handwritten note at the bottom of the final page, penned in Arthur's distinctive, elegant script. My dearest Eleanor, it read. If you are reading this, then my worst fears have been realized, and my son has shown a side of himself I hoped would never surface. I grieve for the pain you have undoubtedly endured, but know that I loved you more than words can express. I built this for you, my love, as a testament to our partnership, our unwavering bond, and my eternal commitment to your happiness and security. You were, and always will be, the true heiress to my heart and my legacy. Trust yourself. You are stronger than you know. Eleanor's vision blurred once more, but this time, the tears were purely for Arthur, for his enduring love, his foresight, his profound understanding of her. He had understood her strength, even when she doubted it herself. He had protected her, not just with money, but with a message of unwavering love that would sustain her through anything. With a deep breath, Eleanor signed her name, sealing her destiny and setting in motion a cascade of justice. 3 days. 3 glorious, empowering days since Mr. Thompson's visit. Eleanor sat at the ornate mahogany desk in what was once Arthur's study, now once again her study, poring over complex financial reports. The numbers, once intimidating, now felt like a secret language she was rapidly relearning, a legacy Arthur had prepared her to manage. A sense of calm, purposeful energy had replaced the despair. She was home. Her focused silence was abruptly shattered by the shrill ring of her phone. The caller ID displayed Michael's name. A slow, knowing smile touched Eleanor's lips as she answered. Mom, what is going on? Michael's voice, usually so clipped and condescending, was now frantic, tinged with a raw panic Eleanor had not heard since he was a frightened child. The cold indifference was gone, replaced by a desperate, guttural fear. Our accounts are frozen. All of them. What kind of mistake is this? You need to call Mr. Albright right now and tell him to fix it. This is your husband's money, Mom. Eleanor leaned back in the plush leather chair, a chair that now truly felt like her own. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. Actually, Michael, she said, I already know exactly what's going on. There was a beat of silence on the other end, a momentary lull in his panic as he tried to decipher her tone. What are you talking about? What do you know? I know about the conditional will. Michael, Eleanor stated, each word precise, landing with the weight of a hammer blow. I know about Arthur's test, and I know about the $8 million you and Serafina spent, money that was never legally yours to touch. A strangled sound came from Michael's end. The conditional what? What are you talking about? Mr. Albright read. The will. You signed everything over to us. You transferred it. His voice rose in pitch, disbelief warring with terror. Mr. Albright read a portion of the will. Michael, Eleanor corrected, a steely edge to her voice. The inheritance you received was conditional. Arthur foresaw your greed, your shift in character after marrying Serafina. He created a test. If you treated me with respect, with kindness, if you ensured my well-being, the inheritance was yours. But if you abandoned me, humiliated me, left me in financial distress, it would all revert to me. Everything. And you, Michael, failed that test spectacularly. A choked whisper came through the line. No, Dad wouldn't have done that. He did love you, Michael, Eleanor said, a pang of sorrow mingling with her resolve. But he also knew you better than I did, apparently. He protected me from exactly what you did. Suddenly, Serafina's enraged screams erupted in the background, a cacophony of fury and disbelief. What? What are you talking about, Michael? No, that's ours. Tell her. Tell her she's lying. Their world, built on stolen foundations, was crumbling around them. Mom, please. Michael's voice was pleading now, raw with desperation. You can't do this. We've spent money. We've made commitments. We bought the Ferrari. We started the renovations on the house. Serafina bought all that jewelry. You're spending, Michael, Eleanor calmly clarified, was not making commitments. It was theft. Theft of money that was conditionally yours. Money you forfeited the moment you decided to discard your own mother. Every single purchase you made with those funds is now a debt you owe to the estate. My estate. Michael's panic abruptly shifted to a venomous anger. You planned this. You and Dad. You planned this whole thing to trap me. Eleanor felt a wave of cold satisfaction wash over her. Your father planned to protect me from exactly what you did to me, Michael. The trap was your own greed. Your own cruelty. You said it yourself, and you walked right into it. A sharp, violent snatching sound, and then Serafina's voice, shrill with unbridled rage, pierced her ear. You bitter old witch, you think you can get away with this? We'll fight this in court. You won't take anything from us. Eleanor remained surprisingly steady, a quiet strength emanating from her. No, dear, she said, her voice a calm, serene counterpoint to Serafina's fury. This isn't about fighting. This is about consequences. And they are all yours. And with that, Eleanor pressed the end call button, severing the connection with a sense of finality that echoed through the now silent study. The calls would continue, she knew, the pleas, the threats, the desperate attempts to salvage their crumbling empire. But Eleanor was done. Her job was far from over. It was only just beginning. The frantic pounding started less than an hour after Eleanor hung up the phone. It was a violent, desperate rhythm that reverberated through the thin walls of her temporary apartment. She knew exactly who it was. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor walked to the door and, leaving the chain latch securely in place, opened it just a crack. Michael and Serafina stood on the landing, looking like shipwreck survivors. Michael's face was pale and streaked with tears, his usually impeccable hair disheveled. Serafina, her mascara smudged, her eyes red and puffy, was sobbing dramatically into her hands. The picture of their despair was almost comical, had it not been for the genuine malice they had inflicted upon her. Mom, please, just talk to us, Michael pleaded, his voice thick with uncharacteristic desperation. Let us in. We can have a rational discussion, please. Serafina lifted her head, her voice a reedy whine. We'll make it up to you, Eleanor. We promise. We can get you a really nice house, a lovely allowance, anything you want. Eleanor stared at them through the narrow opening, her gaze steady and unwavering. She saw their fear, their self-pity, but no glimmer of genuine remorse for her suffering. They still didn't understand. They still thought it was about negotiating a better deal, about money, about a nice house or an allowance. They still failed to grasp that it had always been about love, about respect, about the sanctity of a family bond. There's nothing to discuss, Eleanor said, her voice calm and clear, cutting through their frantic pleas. Mr. Thompson, my attorney, will be in touch regarding the repayment of the $8 million you illegally spent. And, she paused, letting her words sink in, you have 30 days to vacate my house. Michael gasped, a visceral sound of betrayal. No. Mom, that's my childhood home. You can't just take it. It was my home for 40 years. Michael, Eleanor reminded him, her voice holding no trace of emotion. A home I loved, a home I made. Before you and Serafina stripped it bare and threw me out, you forfeited any claim to it the moment you discarded me. He looked at her, his eyes wide and hollow. What would it take, Mom? What do you want? Just tell me. Eleanor simply shook her head. The son she had known, the boy she had raised, was gone. This desperate, grasping stranger was not him. I want you to understand what you did to me, Michael, she said, her voice soft but firm. I want you to feel what it's like to be discarded, to be rendered invisible, by your own family. Serafina, momentarily stunned by Eleanor's calm resolve, erupted again. "This is insane! We'll fight this in court! You won't get away with this, you old hag." Eleanor allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch her lips. "With what, dear? Your frozen accounts?" "I own everything now, Serafina, including your law firm's retainer. They'll drop you the moment Mr. Thompson informs them of the true ownership of your funds." The color drained from Serafina's face. Michael stared at Eleanor, utter defeat settling over him. With a final, profound sense of peace, Eleanor slowly, deliberately, closed the door, the click of the latch echoing their broken hopes. Their frantic pounding and enraged shouting quickly faded into the background, becoming nothing more than a distant, inconsequential echo. 6 months later, Eleanor stood in the sprawling, meticulously tended garden of the Penhaligon estate, her home. She had undone Serafina's cold, sterile renovations, restoring the house to its original warmth and charm. The legal proceedings, guided by Mr. Thompson, had been swift and merciless. Michael and Serafina were found to owe nearly $12 million, including interest and legal fees. Stripped of every asset they had acquired, including their clothes, they were left with nothing but crippling debt. They simply vanished from the social scene, their fate a whispered cautionary tale. As Eleanor admired a newly planted rose bush, Clara Jenkins approached, her face etched with a mixture of shame and genuine regret. "Eleanor," Clara began, her voice soft, "I am so incredibly sorry. Serafina told us such awful things. I should have known better. I was a coward, and honestly, a little jealous. I can't imagine what you went through." Eleanor turned, a gentle smile on her face. "Thank you, Clara. I appreciate your honesty." She accepted the apology, but knew some trust, once shattered, could never be fully repaired. "I hope, moving forward, you'll treat people with the respect they deserve, regardless of their circumstances." Eleanor had indeed reclaimed her life. She traveled, revisiting places she and Arthur had loved, and discovering new ones. She became involved in a foundation for elderly women, advocating for financial literacy and protection against familial abuse. She was no longer just Arthur's wife or Michael's mother. She was Eleanor, a woman who had faced unimaginable betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and whole. Years later, a letter arrived. It was from Michael, a handwritten, humble apology, acknowledging Arthur's wisdom and his own profound mistakes. He mentioned living a quiet life, working hard, and trying to atone. Eleanor read it, a faint sadness in her heart. She understood that some bridges, once burned, could never truly be rebuilt, but she found a quiet peace in his acknowledgement. Her life was hers now, a testament to her resilience, Arthur's enduring love, and the profound power of self-respect.